With the new solo cash cups where only the top 600 players make finals, I thought it was going to be so hard to make it, but it's actually not as hard as you think. So far I've qualified to both solo cash cup finals, and I did it without really even taking any fights. The key to making it to the finals is making as many endgames as possible. Even if you only get a top 25, that's still 25 points. It's a really crazy format, and it is all about making it to the end of the game. So in this video, I'll be giving you lots of tips on how I've made it to finals in the solo cash cup. This video is going to be very strategy based, so it might be a little bit boring, but if you're trying to make it to the finals, this might just help you out. We're going to start by talking about Offspawn, then mid-game, then endgame. So Offspawn, this was probably the hardest thing for me to figure out this season. You know, we got a whole brand new map, so many options on where to land, and it's all new, so figuring that out was tough at the beginning. The way I did it was I went into every single solo victory cup with 3 Offspawn plans. I tried each of them out for like 2 to 3 times throughout the solo cash cup, and if I managed to make it off spawn with decent loot and make it to those end games, then I would keep landing there in the next tourney. But I always had a backup plan just in case. But how do you actually choose which places to test out? So start out by loading up Fortnite.gg and heading over to the map here. Once you're here, turn on all the chests, the floor loot, and fishing rods. So now you have all the loot here, and you can just pick a few spots that you think will work for you. Maybe it's a spot of the map that you know better than the others, or if you want to be like me, this is how I go about it. I like to land at a spot that has a lot of different places you can land. For example, at Seaport, there's a bunch of different large buildings that each have their own stack of loot. So if somebody's landing in this corner, somebody's landing here, somebody's landing up here, I have this whole section here to myself. Yeah, you might get pushed sometimes, but because there's large buildings, you could really just turn it into a ratty fight and survive. That's the whole point of Offspawn, trying to survive as much as possible, whether that means not fighting or picking a spot that you know how to fight really well so you can win Offspawn often. If you were landing at a place like this bridge, yeah, there's loot on the north side, yeah, there's loot on the south side, but more often than not, you guys are gonna end up fighting. So I would only land here if you feel like you can handle your own in an Offspawn fight. But for example, there's a gas station here, there's loot up here, there's loot over here, and there's the bridge. So if you kind of aimed in between, you could scout around, look at where everyone else is going, and curve to a place that's uncontested. You always have to be ready, because let's say someone lands gas station, you go up here instead, you might get pushed by gas station, or if somebody lands up here, they might push you. So you always have to be aware of that. So I just recommend picking 3 spots that you think you can survive off spawn. You might not be correct, you know, that spot might not work, but by having 3 options, you might be able to weed out the bad ones and find a good one eventually. For me, it took like 2 tourneys to find my drop spot, but yeah, pick a few options. There's so much loot on the map, so there's really just unlimited options for you. So last thing about off spawn, the key things that I've been focusing on is 1, not getting greedy for loot. I pretty much would start my rotate out of off spawn once I got a mask. Even a sword is fine, but usually I try to find a mask. If there's nobody around off spawn, I might stay there a little bit longer, but if I'm landing at a place where I know people are going to be rotating into, I might leave there by the time the second zone opens and start getting to dead side of zone. If there's metal at my location, yeah, I might take a little bit of extra time to get that metal, but I don't get greedy. Honestly, getting to the end game is more important than anything. A lot of times I'll go into the end game with just 100 metal, and the reason is, if I get top 20 in that game, then the game was worth playing. But if I die in the mid game because I rotated too late, then that sets you back so far in the tourney. So I'm never getting greedy for loot. Of course, sometimes you might get fought off spawn and you may need to stay there longer. At that point, just play Storm and rotate extra late. But let's head into mid game tips, how to rotate in the mid game and stuff like that. This season, the mid game is super scary, bro. Because of the ARs in the game right now, I'll get beamed to 1 HP anytime I rotate incorrectly. No matter what you do, you're going to get beamed a few times in the tourney, so we'll talk about what to do when that happens as well. To start out, let's hop back into Fortnite.gg and just give a few examples on how to rotate in the mid game. So the whole goal of your mid game rotate is to avoid congestion, avoid where you know players are going to be. So let's say we're landing at Seaport and it's pulling straight to the west here. My goal is to get to this side of the zone because, you know, that's the dead side of the zone. If it's pulling to the west, it's going to keep pulling to the west for the next few zones. So I wouldn't go just straight down the center. That's what a lot of players do. They just rotate straight down the center, and that would cause you to rotate straight through Foxy, and you might get beamed along the way. There's going to be a lot of people there. Instead, I would maybe follow this route. You know, I start by going straight, and then I kind of cut it up through these mountains where I know there's not going to be players. I wouldn't go too close to Masked Meadows. I would kind of keep it up in these mountains here. I also probably wouldn't go down to the water unless you're trying to get a fishing rod, because a lot of people usually go there in the mid game to fish. If you have a fishing rod, rod, I would recommend just carrying it. Carry it till you get to the part of the zone where you want to be. A lot of players might stop here and start fishing, but you're putting yourself on the edge of zone where all the players are going to be, versus if you hold that fishing rod and save it for later in the game, you could get to a better spot and save those fish. Like, let's say you stop here to fish for a little bit and then you have 6 shield fish. You're carrying it in the mid game and you get beamed along the way because you stopped on the side of zone where all the players are. Instead, if you fished up here near Night Shift Forest, after you get those fish, you're not going to need to rotate anymore because the zone's probably going to keep pulling to you. So by saving the fishing rod till later, you'll actually end up saving those fish too. Anyways, back to this rotate. The goal is to get up there. Once I get here, I could cut it up this way, avoiding Canyon Crossing, kind of split Warrior's Watch in this small spot here, and then boom, we're at Night Shift Forest. Alternatively, you could kind of drop under Canyon Crossing. There's like a whole valley here, and then go around this backside like that. So that's the whole goal. Avoid these congested areas. I know there's people at the water. I know there's people at Foxy Canyon as well. Just avoid the POIs. Let's do one other example. So we're back at Seaport and the zone is pulling up here. In this situation, you might be thinking, oh, I'm already basically in the zone. I don't need to rotate right away. But realistically, I still try to rotate early because of the fact that all of these POIs down here in the south are going to be rotating straight to you, especially since Seaport has a lot of metal. So I would try to get out there relatively early, and I'm just following these places where there's not a lot of chests. There's not going to be a lot of players there. I might cut it back here and go the long route since, you know, you're already close to the zone. You have a lot of time to get to this dead side zone, but you could also cut it through here in between Pumped Power and Demon Dojo, and maybe even stop in Pump Power just for a brief second to farm a little metal if you need it. A lot of times I save my metal farming until later in the game. By doing that, I don't always guarantee that I'm going to get metal, but I get to the dead side of zone faster, so it helps me not get beamed in the mid game. But at the end of the day, if I have max wood, max brick, and a little bit of metal, I'm gonna be comfortable just sitting up in this dead side of zone up here for the next like 5 minutes. I'm not gonna go farm metal in the open for like 3 minutes and risk getting beamed. I'm just gonna accept the fact that I have the loot that I need to get like a top 10, and I'll just go for a refresh in endgame. Hopefully those examples help. It's all about avoiding congestion, using landforms to break line of sight with enemies, and staying aware so if there is an enemy near you, you see them before they see you, and you can kind of just start to move away and disengage, or go for a beam. Inevitably, at some points, you're going to get fought, so when that happens, you just need to fight back. Play defensive, you know, make boxes and fight from there. Don't like build fight because you're just gonna get third-partied, and then play your angles. I went through my last few tourneys, and yeah, I got beamed a few times, but I literally only got fought in the mid game like 4 separate times. And that's all because of how I rotate the mid game and how I don't spend too much time off spawn looting. I don't get greedy. That way I can get ahead of the rotates and get to dead side early. I'm playing a few of those times I got keyed in the mid game, and these were from EU, so I was on 90 ping. In these fights, you can tell I've just been playing for full-blown survival. I'm really just making a lot of space so I can get my heals off and doing anything I can to survive. That's what this tourney is about. If you survive to the end games, you can qual, even if you're not very good at mid game fighting, or if you play on high ping like me in this tourney. So quick recap, go into your next solo cup with 3 off spawn strategies if you don't have a good drop spot. Don't get greedy off spawn for loot. Rotate smart in the mid game. Try to not just rotate straight up the center. Really think about where you're rotating to not get beamed, and stay aware. Just try to make those end games. With all that stuff being said, let's talk about a few things with end game. If you get easily overwhelmed in end game, you should definitely play my map Forever Zone Wars. That'll help you get used to all the chaos happening in endgame, but it's always going to be a little different in the actual game. So here's a few things that I've noticed this season are really important in endgame. First off, when you're rotating, you need to instantly box up as soon as possible. Don't get greedy rotating a few extra steps by foot if you're in the open. If you're using a void mask and you land off the void mask, immediately box up. The less time you're visible, the less chances you'll have of getting beamed to 1 HP. If you get beamed to 1 HP in endgame, you're basically dead. To go along with that idea of not being visible in endgame, you want a void mask from your box. Just flip your cone up and void out of your box. You need to be ahead of the game. Try not to wait too long to do this, otherwise you're going to be taking a lot of storm. And honestly, endgames with the void mask is all about rhythm. You void mask, you base up, you look for a refresh, and you do it again. A lot of pro players have been saying don't void mask up in the air because you might get beamed by height, but I'll tell you this, I've played every solo cup, lots of endgames, I've never once even got shot shot while void masking an endgame. It can happen, especially if you void mask straight up in the air. But doing it at these diagonals like I've been doing has been working for me really well. Make sure you scout around you before void masking, by the way. If somebody's based up right above you and you open up that cone to throw the void mask, they might just jump in on you. So always be aware of which angle you're opening, who's around you, and being ahead of the game and kind of scouting that out early is really important. Otherwise, you're going to be rushing decisions. When it comes to looking for refreshes, honestly, I mean, this is kind of a crazy take. Pros, you know, they get refreshes all throughout the endgame like crazy. But what I've been doing personally is playing a much more passive endgame. I play out all of my materials and then I look for a refresh. I'm always looking for a refresh, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to force any plays until I'm really low on mats. If somebody next to me gets cracked, obviously I'm going to fight that. But by playing this more passive approach, which I've been doing, it gives you more consistent top 15 placements, which is all you need to qualify. If you needed to win games, you know, if you needed to get top 5s, obviously looking for refreshes would be more important. But because of the point format, a top 15 is insanely valuable, and if you can get that consistently, that's all you need. So that's why I've been playing a little bit more cautious and not going for as many refreshes. People have been judging me in my comments a little bit for that. They're like,
you need to go for more refreshes.
But the way I've been playing has been working so far. Like last tourney, I got right around top 100 in the opens, and I didn't even play that well. Goes to show that this strategy works. Anyways, guys, this has just been how I've been playing the solo cup. You know, definitely watch pros, learn from their gameplay. They play a lot more aggressive than I do, but I'm not the greatest fighter, especially since I moved away from zero ping. And this strategy has been working for me. Even when I play in the EU solo cup, I almost qualified playing just like this. So hopefully this video helps you out. If not, I'm sorry, but good luck to you guys in the next solo cup. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.